Okay, so we've created our pages, but obviously they do not render with the template. Now, adding a template is really pretty straightforward now. Because we've added already path to the partials, if we go back to the editor, we've added already path to the partials directory from within our config file, as you may remember. We've got this partial path here. In that case, obviously, whatever we do, if we request any file using include, require, require once, or include once method, then it will automatically look into this directory whether the file exists. So in order for us to actually apply templates to, let's say, index.php file, and I'm talking about the index.php file within the pages directory, not the main one which actually does all the routing and everything. This one stays untouched. We're not playing with this file at all now because we've already set everything that we had to set within this file. We're talking about the index.php inside of the pages. You can rename it to home, but if you want to rename it to home, make sure that then within the functions, if we go back, sorry, not functions, config, you change this default page file name to home as well. Basically, because this is indicating which one is the home page file, and it indicates that obviously we're talking about the index.php here rather than home. But as I'm saying, if you want to change it to home to anything else that you obviously find more meaningful, then make sure that you change it obviously as well in a config file when you rename the file. Basically, the name needs to match. Okay, so we've got, if we go back to the index, what we need to do here is basically use PHP tag and then require once, because we only want to include this file once. We don't ever want the situation where the file this header file has been included twice. And again, this time I'm using brackets in between a single double quotes, just the name of the file we want to include, because we know that this require once will automatically look within the partials directory. So all we need to do is say, well, which file we want? Header.php. So header.php. Now semicolon and close the PHP tag. Now, if we copy the entire thing and after the content, we will request the footer. And if we now save the file, preview everything in a browser, refresh the home page, and there we go. We've got a template and we've got our content in between. So basically the content is now within the template rather than just being on its own on a page. And as you can see, everything works. If we click on the About Us page, we go to the About Us page, but this page obviously needs the same thing. So let's quickly go through all these files. So in the head and footer for the About, let's quickly do it before the heading and then footer after. There we go, save it. Next one is going to be contact, starting with the footer and then header for the top. There we go, then we have arrow, which also needs the template. We could, of course, use this require once header and footer directly from within. If I just go back to the functions, within the function get page, we could just put it here, require once header, and then after this require, because this is obviously requiring one of these files, and then footer, require footer after, and then every single page would have header and footer. But sometimes it may not quite be what you want to do with your file. Let's say if you have any e-commerce website, when you need to render the invoice, it doesn't really need the header and footer, you just need a plain white page with, say, items obviously displayed, in which case you just won't include them on the page, and obviously this is giving you a little bit more flexibility basically. So you don't have to have it. If we were to have it here and within this get page, then every single page that is actually included on the website would have header and footer. Having them this way, obviously, you have more of a control of it over this. So let's save this error.php. We've got index already done, and obviously the last page we have is products. Obviously, if you have more pages, make sure that you apply the same thing to them, unless, of course, you don't want to have a template on a given page. And if we now save it, and now let's go back to the browser, refresh the page for the About Us, and there we go. About Us content is here. We click on the products page, products content, then contact content. Okay, now a few things. Obviously, this slideshow should only show on the home page. So let's try and sort this one out first. If we go back to the editor, the first thing we are going to do, we can actually close this index.php because we're not going to be making any more changes here. Let's go to our functions.php. If I scroll right to the bottom, the first thing I'm going to do is to create a new function. And this function will be called isHome, and it will basically return Boolean true or false based on whether the current page that we are on is actually our home page. So function is home, and what we're doing, we're not passing any arguments. Let's put this curly brace here. And what we are going to do is first create the variable called page. And we are going to use another function, get page identifier, the one we've created earlier, to get the identifier of the current page on which we are actually landed. So now I'm going to check return, but actually I'm going to return a statement, and within the statement I'm going to basically check the page which we are on. Does it equal the default? It's not that one. It was default page file name. If it equals default page file name, that means it's a home page, because if we go back to the config.php, default page file name is our home page. It basically indicates which file corresponds to our home page and its index, which is obviously this file. And if it is, obviously if we have index here, then that obviously means yes, we are on the home page. So now what we can do, if we go to the header, when we have actually included this slider, what we can do here is I'm going to move this require once down, and what I'm going to do before this require once is do the conditional statement, checking if, obviously lowercase, if, and in between the brackets is home, then we are going to have this require once. And that's the only time that we actually going to have this require once, because if this condition evaluates, if this function evaluates, returns false basically, and this statement, in other words, will evaluate to false, then this slider will never be required. So if we now save it and preview it in the browser, refresh the page, we're on a home page, fair enough, we've got a slider. But if we go to About Us, there we go, slider's gone. So it's only going to be displayed on the home page. If I go back to the home page, there we go, slider's back. Now one thing, if we go back, one thing that I'm thinking of is this specific statement here in home function might be useful for some other functionality. Later on, we are going to be applying active status, if I go back to the site, to the button. So when we click, this is going to basically be the way that the button is going to be displayed with this red background, just yellow border and yellow text. When we obviously end it on this page. At the moment, if we go there, obviously navigation stays the same. It doesn't change anything. But just to indicate later on, we're going to highlight it this way, making it active. So this functionality is checking for whether the existing page equals a given page, might be useful later on as well. So what I'm thinking, let's try and refactor this is home function a little bit. Let's create another function, which is going to be called is page, and this one will take identifier, which will basically indicate what page we want to compare, what page name, what page URL we want to compare. And I'm going to basically copy this entire code here, paste it in, and what I'm going to do is now, rather than comparing to default page file name, I'm going to compare against this identifier. So what this function does, I'm going to pass through the identifier I want to compare, and this function will tell me, okay, is this where we actually are at the moment? So if you pass, let's say, about, and you are on About Us page, then it's going to take the page identifier first, it will return about, and then we'll compare. Does about equal what you just passed through? Yes, it does, so it will return true. So is this the page we're actually on? Yes, it is. So what I'm going to do now that we've got this is page function, what I can do is remove this code, and I can pretty much remove everything here and just use this is page function and pass the identifier we want to compare. So basically, I'm just going to remove these spaces here as well. So what I'm basically doing, passing this index through, and if we're going to be on a home page, this page identifier, as it did previously in this function, will return obviously the current page identifier, and then it will check, does this current page identifier equals what we've just passed through, which is going to be index string, basically. And if it does, then obviously it's going to tell us yes or not. So let's just quickly check it in the browser again, just to make sure everything works. If we click on the logo, which is taking us to the home page as well. And there we go, it works. So now we have additional functionality. We basically refactored the function because the functionality within this function could be used in some other scenarios. So rather than duplicating the code to achieve the same result, we just created a more generic function, which we can then reuse from those more specific functions, which are actually checking for a given constant in this case, or any other obviously string that we would be passing through and comparing against. So rather than duplicating all this, we just have one function, and now we can just pass the argument and compare against it.